Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Emotional Grit, the podcast where you can learn about the power of perspective and the science that fuels us. I'm your host, Jennifer Fernjack, and I'm incredibly grateful to say that my guest today is TK Mehlhaff. We're going to be talking about her amazing journey of venturing into a world with people who can hear, but the fear of things just don't stop her. She's really amazing. So please feel free to like and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube at Emotional Grit, and we'll go ahead and get things started. So TK, thanks for being here along with your interpreter, Jordan, today.
I'm happy to be here.
Great. So now, were you born deaf or did it happen over time? Or was there something that happened as you got older that where it happened?
Really, I've been deaf my whole life. When I was born, we didn't know because I was adopted. And so I just say that I've been deaf my whole life.
So basically it's the only world you've ever known, so to speak, and how to navigate it.
No, I experienced both worlds, both the hearing and the deaf world. I have a hearing family that I grew up with. And so I've practiced hearing ways and hearing culture, but at the same time, I've gone to a deaf school. I have gone to social events. I've gone to deaf camps. So really, that socialization has helped develop my signing skills. And I'm not the only deaf person. I found other deaf persons, and I'm like, wow, you are the same as me. And so there's that connection, and we can go from that and personal growth in that as well. Because because the deaf community is so small, and we really value our culture and our language, and so that's how I grew up.
That's amazing. So when I watched your interview on NPR, you had mentioned something about try to inspire people, which you do very well, as far as don't let fear stop you. Do you think that that's a mindset that you were raised with, or do you think that that's something that anybody, including me as well, with my own health scare, that people kind of acquire over time? Or do you think it's kind of like, you know what, it's obviously anybody could do it. It's just a matter of sometimes having the discipline and drive to and the patience to do certain things.
I think it's more of personal discipline and that I'm self-taught. And really, I grew up in a wonderful family. They don't sign a lot like when I was growing up. So that's kind of where I developed my own, like kind of learning how to learn on my own and growing on my own. And so I've experienced frustrations and struggles throughout my life. And there's been a lot of that. And that has made me and shaped me. And I've had a lot of experiences. For example, I've had some health issues. I've dealt with cancer in the past for 3 months. I was in the hospital.
Oh.
Really, it was a painful experience, but at the same time, my strength has been out of this world, and it's really good and has been really positive and made me feel that I could keep going and I could persevere through this, and I never gave up through that whole experience.
Well,
so I think that that has been my journey and my process, and not allowing fear to stop me. And I live my life.
I see a lot of value in that mindset. And I know that that's what I try to inspire people to kind of have as their mindset, whether it's through job stress or relationship issues, or for me, it was a brain tumor scare, things like that. And it's interesting how you can take experiences, like for me, the fact that I had my brain tumor scare, I now have an enhanced appreciation for little things in life. Like I love the fact, like when I can see green grass, because I didn't know coming out of surgery for the tumor if I'd still be able to see, you know? So it's interesting how things you might take for granted all of a sudden carry a lot of weight in a positive way when something happens. So it's pretty amazing. When you left your home to go to college, what are some examples of things that you on your own now had to do as far as trying to adapt to being on your own?
It was not easy as a deaf person, but I wanted to show that a deaf person could do it. So I remember when I went to Gallaudet, that's where in Washington, D.C., a deaf university where deaf people from all over the world go to school. I went there, and that really helped my personal growth. And
Oh,
after I graduated on my own, that was a tough part, being by myself, because there's a lot of hearing people and they tend to have like an easier life. It's easy for them to find a job, for them to drive, to have a support system, a family. But for me, it was different. I had to work twice as hard to get all of those opportunities to get a job, but still I persisted and I was stubborn through it all. And I found a job and I grew through all of those experiences. And really, I think some family and friends who have supported me along the way have really helped me as well.
oh yeah.
I have no regrets.
Wow.
None.
That's fantastic. I know when I was listening to your interview on NPR, you had mentioned something about how you were walking past the business in Minneapolis called France 44, and how you saw a sign, if I remember correctly, saying they were looking to hire someone. And rather than think to yourself, oh, I would be interested in doing that, but I'm sure they couldn't accommodate my needs. You instead thought, well, why not? Why would I not go apply for it? And now you're a wine tasting specialist, who works there. So that's just that shows your tenacity and that mindset. The fact that you would think, well, why not me? Why would I not apply for it? A lot of people can learn from that and be inspired by that mindset. So, what are some different ways at your job that you are able to communicate with customers and communicate with colleagues? I know I saw an iPad in a video, but which would help. But what are some of the ways that you or things that you do to communicate with people?
Really, many people have asked me that question. But what's nice about modern technology and phones is that people can text back and forth. They can, there's a transcribing app that's called Live Transcribe that I use, and that has been a big benefit to communicating with people. And so it's helped me to do my job. And so it just transcribes what people are saying and I can read it. And as a wine specialist, I help people to understand the wine, what are the different kinds, the different tastes. And so sometimes we use notes to communicate back and forth. It's really nice where I work. They're all very friendly. It's very diverse in that area as well. And I feel very safe there. And so
Cool.
I've learned a lot at France 44. I've taken some classes with interpreters. I have to because access is important. And so I've taken a lot of classes and I've learned a lot. And I love drinking wine as well. So
Nothing wrong with that, right? Yeah, that's awesome. So I know when I was growing up, I learned about how Beethoven became deaf as an adult. I think he might have been completely deaf by the time that he was in his early 40s, if I'm not mistaken. But how he obviously was a composer and loved to not just listen to music, but actually write music. So I can't even imagine, what he experienced then, losing his hearing. So one of the things that I learned about as far as how he kind of figured out the how and was very resilient was he would take the equivalent of a pencil and put it in his mouth and then tip his head and have the equivalent of the pencil touch the piano or whatever instrument it was that he was working with. And he could then feel the vibrations, through that piece into his mouth. And that was part of what helped him, just because he couldn't hear the music doesn't mean he couldn't feel it. And of course, at the risk of dating myself, when I learned that as a kid, there was no Google back then. I couldn't just go to Google and learn more about that. So there were just a lot of unknowns. But I thought, man, that's so cool. So fast forward to 2024 now, and I know one of the things that you had shared with me before the interview today was that when you were going to college, that you were a cheerleader and on a dance team. And I find that so amazing. So, could you please describe for people what that's like as far as being able to feel the music and how you can dance to it?
yeah, like you mentioned about Beethoven, he used feeling to feel the vibration. And it's really fascinating how people can always find a way to enjoy music. So for me, I can feel the vibrations and we can follow the beat. Count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8, and just follow the counting. So we practice together, dance to the beat. And really, there are a lot of deaf people who are performers.
Wow.
And so they dance and they sign to music. And there are just many different ways that deaf people can perform. And so really we all can feel and follow the beat. And sometimes we can watch the lyrics online with the music, and so we can follow that as well. And really, I love dance and I love music.
So cool.
And sometimes the music is loud, so I can, like, if when I'm by myself, I'll turn it up and kind of like sing along with it, maybe sign with it. But there are just so many different ways to enjoy music.
Wow. So when you think back to your days in college, who were some of your favorite artists that you liked to dance to? Or when you were in high school, for that matter, too?
Really, I don't follow any specific artists. I just follow the dance. And so sometimes I would dance to like specific songs, but really no specific artists.
Okay. So I know there's this neuroscience area of study now called neuronostalgia. And with neuronostalgia, it's about how when people hear music, whether it is certain songs where you don't even know who the artist is, but you recognize the tune from back when you were between the ages of about 12 and 22, that it'll actually bring back positive memories of that time and the experiences of either dancing to that music or listening to it, and how it can actually affect the brain in a positive way by influencing your feel good chemicals like dopamine, and it could also lower stress hormones too. So it's interesting how music can literally affect people physically in a positive way. Not just the enjoyment of the song, but actually having it make you feel good while you're doing it. Pretty cool. So also I've learned that and I've seen videos on YouTube where there are certain artists nowadays who will have people doing sign language on the side of the stage. So it might be artists like Bruce Springsteen or Snoop Dogg or the Beastie Boys. I mean, there's just a number of different groups that are out there now where there'll be challenges where I forget the name of the interpreter, but I saw this video of how there's this rap artist who is known for rapping really fast. And so he would purposely rap really fast, but this interpreter that knows sign language really well would keep up with him. And so on stage, it was almost like she kind of, upstaged him, kind of like, yeah, this is so cool. She can keep up with him. And yeah, it was really, really neat. But um, now, did you learn at a young age, or perhaps even as an adult, just the benefits of being able to, in this case, not dance per se, but at least be able to go to a concert and listen to music, and how again the vibrations can affect you physically?
I want to mention one thing before I go into the question. The interpreter is up on stage during the concert. Really, most of the time, the interpreter is a deaf interpreter. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't know that. Wow.
I don't know, maybe I could be wrong, but most people prefer a deaf interpreter on stage with the performer because it's their natural language and it's easier for them to perform in that. And so you have another interpreter downstage, like on low, like below the stage. And so the deaf interpreter can mirror their signs on stage and work together as a team. And so you have somebody who can hear below the stage, and then the deaf interpreter is on stage, kind of translating, but into ASL. And most of the time, the deaf interpreter is a certified deaf interpreter, a CDI. And so that they do more of kind of like the mediation between the two languages. And so it's easier for deaf people to understand and to connect with the deaf interpreter. So now back to the point. Like at a concert, I've always enjoyed going to concerts because there's an interpreter there. And so if there wasn't an interpreter, I mean, maybe I would still go. I would enjoy it 50% only because I didn't know the words. I could feel the beat and dance to it, but that said, I wouldn't know what the words were. But with an interpreter, I can understand and I can enjoy all 100% of the concert.
Cool. One time I met a stranger on an airplane who was telling me about how his aunt is deaf, and how when she was growing up in the 60s, I guess where they're from, it was popular for people who were deaf to go to concerts but have a blown up balloon with them. And they would feel the balloon because the balloon would be vibrating. They were close enough to the speakers that the balloon would vibrate to the sounds of the music. Have you ever seen that before or heard of that before? It's going back to the 1960s, so I wasn't sure if it was still a popular thing to do in that fashion.
I don't know, I doubt that it happens now. But I think now, with technology, it has changed so much and it has developed a lot. And now it's a lot more accessible. We have the ADA law, and that's where a lot of places are required to provide interpreters. So now it's more common to have an interpreter than it was before.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, awesome. So I also want to talk about pets because again, I travel a fair amount for work. So I meet people on airplanes or in restaurants or whatever who share amazing stories. But there was a gentleman who I met whose dog is deaf. and he taught the dog sign language, so certain things like, sit, sleep, or not sleep, but lay down, food, that kind of thing. And he mentioned that it also happens sometimes when the dog itself is not deaf, but perhaps the owner is. And so I'm wondering, in the video that I watched of yours from NPR, I think it mentioned that you have a service dog, or at least you used to have one. And I'm wondering if that service dog knows some commands in sign language.
Yes, I used to have a service dog. So I have one also in training, and it knows like the basics of ASL, like sit, friend, roll over, stay. And the dog is very smart, but at the same time, it's a little, it still has a long ways to go and a lot to learn. And the dog and knowing ASL can help communicate. So if there's, having a service dog can help deaf people have more access to the environment. Because if there's an emergency, the service dog would know where the door is, or if something happens that the dog can hear, they would let me know. And so service dogs are not only for deaf, that are emotional dogs as well. And to have that emotional connection. Oh, and my service dog is not only a service dog, but also an emotional dog.
Cool. And I know with the book that I wrote, that as you can see above my head, there's a theme here. The book that I wrote about emotional grit, I wrote about the science of things in everyday life, such as music, but also pets and how they can affect people physically in a positive way. And I was interested to learn as part of my studies that not only can being around a loving pet, again, affect those feel-good chemicals of the brain in people, but it can also affect the feel-good chemicals in the brain of the pet. Like there's a reason why a dog's tail wags and why they're excited they're smiling with their eyes to see you. There are actual MRIs. I saw an episode of 60 Minutes with Anderson Cooper where they actually did some images of a dog's brain when it saw images of its owner, and how, yeah, the dopamine lit up. But and the same thing can be said for music too in the deaf community, how music can also affect those, neurochemicals regardless of the song. So pretty interesting stuff. But really cool. So are there other things even beyond music and pets and different things that might surprise people that you can think of about the deaf community, as far as other examples of ways to adapt, or activities that people will do that might kind of surprise people?
Really, as a deaf community, we have Deaf Night Out or ASL Night Out once a month. And so it's people from all over the state.
Cool.
And it depends on who hosts based on their time and if they're available. But Minnesota has 3 different places. One is in Duluth. And we call it the Superior area. One person here in the Twin Cities, and one person in Fairburn.
Cool.
And so how it works is that we have 2 or 3 or 4 people who host, and they decide whether we go to like a brewery or what place we go to. And the event is not only for deaf, just for ASL users, for interpreters or people who are learning sign language. They can go and interact and socialize with the deaf community. We have a good time, and I think that that's where the deaf community can take advantage of that in a positive way. And because we can build those connections and foster that community and communication, because most deaf people in the deaf community don't grow up with a deaf family or deaf people in their family to sign with. Often it's just a hearing person who are speaking, and so the deaf person feels isolated because there is no one to sign with. And so when they go to a deaf community event, they just feel so much more relaxed because they can sign and be with people who know their language. And I think that that is also an emotional aspect of it as well.
Oh, yeah, that's great. So if any of the listeners of our podcast today want to learn more about those events, is there a particular website that they would go to, or should they just Google a certain term, or?
Really, on Facebook is where I learned. So there is a group for it. I think it's called ASL Night Out dash Minnesota. And really there are events like all over, but this one is specific to Minnesota. And there are other groups where the deaf community posts about news, updates, many different things as well.
I can see how people would have felt exceptionally isolated before access to the internet. I mean, that's a really big deal, you know. But um, I've also learned recently that there are people who teach their toddlers sign language, even though they can hear, because they're able to do the signs, like for more food. I think isn't this more? I think more, yeah, for food and things like that, before they're able to articulate words. So before the hearing toddlers can actually speak, they'll do the sign language. So that's pretty cool, you know. But are there any misconceptions about the deaf community that you can think of that you want to clarify for people?
I want to explain the difference between small d and big D, like lowercase d and uppercase D deaf. So sometimes there is a big spectrum in the deaf community. And so lowercase d deaf all the way to people who are deaf blind. And there are many people who don't know that there is a difference. And so I think that that is a problem when people don't know and don't want to be open-minded about it. And they get scared when new information is brought to them. But really they need to learn to be open-minded. The reason why the two of us are wearing black shirts is because it's best to have a dark color or black background, but I don't have one, unfortunately. But when you're working with that blind, all the way down to people who are a lowercase deaf, we're not all the same with our deafness. Some people have a deaf family, some people have a hearing family, but everybody's different. Everybody's experience is different. So when you're working with somebody who is deaf blind, you have to sign a little cleaner because visuals are so important. Captions are important as well for any deaf person when you're watching a video. And you have to make sure too that the colors that you're wearing or the colors of your background aren't too flashy. Okay. And me, I'm in between the small D deaf and the big D deaf. Yes, I love deaf culture and I immerse myself in it sometimes. But I think that most people think that all deaf people are the same, but really they're not all the same.
That's a good point. And then that's a good point to call out for sure. Are there resources out there that you want to bring to people's attention? Like any particular websites or places in general that people should be aware of?
I don't know any specific websites, but one that popped up into my mind is nad.org, because a lot of resources and information about what access is available or what access is needed with the deaf community is there, because most of the time we struggle with like doctor's appointments or different places that we go, and when we request an interpreter, sometimes they say no, they won't provide it or they can't provide it. But then we show them that they have to according to ADA. And that happens to the deaf community. It happened to me before. With a doctor's appointment or request an interpreter 1 month in advance. I let like the doctor's office know that I need an interpreter. And they
Smart.
said, but I arrive at the doctor's appointment and there's no interpreter. So
Okay.
it's
Wow.
like, oh, we're sorry, or it's too expensive, or do you mind just writing back and forth? I said no, because a doctor's appointment is important to know. I need to know all of those specific terms and information because my health is important.
Absolutely.
I need access.
That's another thing that I gleaned from your NPR video is the importance of being a self advocate and just reminding people that if you don't speak up on things that or when you have a need, that people don't necessarily know that anything is wrong, or they might not know that maybe something carries a lot of weight with you and that it is important, that it's a need, not just a want. And so it's really important to be very vocal and speak up and just be a self advocate. Yeah, that's a great point. So as we close things out, is there anything that I haven't brought up that we should discuss? Anything come to mind? Any stories or anything that you want to share?
I want to close with a good one. Applies to both of us, the interpreter and myself. Many people don't understand why, when I go to like a doctor's office or a courtroom, why there's two interpreters. One is a hearing interpreter and one is a deaf interpreter. And many people don't understand the reason why. So I want the hearing community to understand that. It's not about why there's two interpreters, but it's about the person that you're serving. And so communication and language is important. And most people are like, why do you have two? Why do you have two? But really the point is that it's teamwork. And not like the two of us, we're working together to make sure that communication is clear and doing our jobs right. And I know that some people and some deaf people don't sign, or they do sign like me, and they sign, maybe sometimes people sign really English, or maybe some people just don't understand English. As a deaf person, it's hard to, so you bring in an interpreter who is skilled in sign language.
For people who are deaf who don't sign, do they just do more lip reading? And I'm wondering how that worked during the pandemic when so many people were wearing masks. That must have been a bit of a challenge, I would think. You're like, yeah, it was a challenge.
Yeah, that was my struggle too.
Yeah.
It was very frustrating with that time.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm I'm happy that yeah, that we are past that. So that's good. But as part of my research for today's episode, I wanted to learn how to say thank you appropriately. So TK and Jordan, thank you. And to those of you who are listening today, thank you very kindly for joining us. Again, please feel free to go to YouTube and subscribe to the podcast channel called Emotional Grit, and have a great day.